Have you ever had a completely normal conversation with someone, and then hours later, you suddenly start replaying everything you said? You remember one sentence, one awkward pause, or even the way they looked at you, and suddenly your mind asks, did I say something wrong? You tell yourself to stop thinking about it, but somehow your brain keeps going back to the same moment. If you've ever experienced this, you're not alone. And the reason you do it may be deeper than you think. The first reason is that your brain doesn't always treat social situations as finished just because the conversation is over. When something feels uncertain, your mind keeps analyzing it because it's trying to find an answer. Did they like me? Did I sound weird? Did I talk too much? Your brain is basically trying to solve a problem that may not even exist. The uncomfortable part is that there may never be a perfect answer, so the thinking continues. Another reason is self-awareness. People who are highly self-aware often notice tiny details that other people completely ignore. You remember your exact words, your facial expression, their reaction, and even the few seconds of silence between sentences. But here's the important part. Other people usually aren't analyzing you as much as you think. They're busy thinking about their own lives, their own problems, and their own conversations. This is why one small, awkward moment can feel enormous inside your own head. Imagine saying something slightly embarrassing. You might think about it for the next 3 hours. Meanwhile, the other person may have forgotten about it 5 minutes later. Your brain gives the moment more importance because you experienced it from the inside. You felt the embarrassment, the nervousness, and the uncertainty. They didn't experience your thoughts. They only heard a sentence. Sometimes, overthinking conversations also comes from a fear of being misunderstood. You don't just want people to hear your words. You want them to understand what you actually meant. So when you're not completely sure how someone interpreted you, your brain starts creating different possibilities. Maybe they thought I was rude. Maybe they think I'm boring. Maybe I should have explained myself differently. And the more possibilities you create, the harder it becomes to relax. There is another interesting reason this happens. You may be trying to control how other people see you. You want to make the right impression, say the right thing, and avoid making mistakes. But no matter how carefully you speak, you can't completely control someone's perception of you. And once your brain realizes that, it can create anxiety because it wants certainty that simply isn't available. The biggest trap is trying to find the perfect version of the conversation. You replay it and imagine what you should have said. You create a better response in your head. Then you imagine how the other person might have reacted. But this creates a dangerous illusion. It makes you believe that if you analyze the conversation enough, you can change the outcome. You can't. The conversation already happened. And sometimes, the reason you're replaying the conversation isn't because something went wrong. It's because you cared about the outcome. Maybe you really wanted someone to like you. Maybe the conversation was important to you. Maybe you were talking to someone you admire. The more emotionally important a person or situation is, the more attention your brain gives it afterward. So how do you stop doing this? The first step is surprisingly simple. Stop treating every thought as evidence. Just because your brain says, they probably thought I was weird, doesn't mean that's what happened. That's a thought, not a fact. Try asking yourself, what actual evidence do I have? Most of the time, you'll realize that your mind has been filling in the blanks. The second step is to stop judging yourself for being awkward sometimes. You're human. You're gonna say the wrong thing occasionally. You're gonna have awkward pauses. You're gonna misunderstand someone. And sometimes you'll wish you had answered differently. That's normal. Confidence doesn't mean you never make social mistakes. Confidence means you don't let one small mistake define how you see yourself. The next time you catch yourself replaying a conversation, try something different. Instead of asking, what did I do wrong? Ask, is there actually something I need to fix? If the answer is yes, learn from it and move on. If the answer is no, let the moment stay where it belongs, in the past. You don't need to mentally reopen a conversation that has already ended. And remember this, most people aren't thinking about you nearly as much as you think they are. They're thinking about their own relationships, their own mistakes, their own future, and their own insecurities. You might be replaying a conversation from yesterday while they're wondering what they said wrong in a conversation with someone else. So if you constantly replay conversations after they end, don't immediately assume that something is wrong with you. Maybe you're self-aware. Maybe you care deeply about how you affect people. Maybe your brain simply hates uncertainty. But you don't have to obey every thought your mind produces. Sometimes, the healthiest thing you can do is accept that the conversation happened. Accept that you were imperfect, and let yourself move forward. Because at the end of the day, you don't need to be perfect to be understood. You don't need to say everything perfectly to be liked. And you don't need to replay every conversation just to prove that you didn't make a mistake. Let the conversation end. Let the thought pass. And give your mind permission to be quiet. If this video described you, subscribe. Because here, we explore the psychology behind the thoughts and behaviors we experience every day. And remember, not every thought deserves your attention.